if Nebraska is the team that I think they could be, this could be this year's Indiana. And I think that's a very large claim to have where we're talking about them being this year's Indiana. But I also do believe that this is a team that could take a major step forward, that could be a unexpected, 10-2. But our first topic for today, and what we're going to be diving into, which I think is so interesting for a college football season, that if you were to look at the landscape of college football right now, you could easily look at the top 10, top 15, even the top 20 teams. And as we go into the season, you can convince yourself of so many incredible feats. We see Indiana make a college football playoff. We've seen a top 10 team in the nation go 2-10. And when you have this much volatility, this much insane dynamics between what we project to be the best teams in the nation go off the cliff, and teams that have been dormant for years and are seen as basketball schools making the mountaintop of college football, we are now in a position where all the chips are on the table. And so who is going to be the first ones with the 12-team playoff format? Who are going to be the first to take that step forward and get to the college football playoff? Because I think it's very interesting as we talk about the college football playoff and as it's expanded, who are going to be the ones to get their first crack at it? I mean, I think a lot of us forget that Michigan State, there's, I don't believe Wisconsin got in there. I mean, TCU, there's a lot of teams that snuck in to that 4-team playoff that you have already forgotten to have had a chance. Now, I'm not saying Michigan State is going to make the college football playoff in 2025, though I do like Aiden Childs, their quarterback, a lot. And it's someone that I think you should definitely have on your radar as someone that could be an electric quarterback. But I don't want to derail myself. I will say this. You see the Texas A&M pennant behind me. And if it is your first time, obviously, because it's the first episode, I will say this. I was born a Texas A&M fan. It's my greatest fault. If I was single on a dating app, it'd be my red flag. I will be always transparent that I have been a Texas A&M fan my entire life. But I think you have to be a fan somewhere to talk about college football. And there's going to be maybe a 55-45% bias towards Texas A&M. But when we're talking about their first college football playoff appearance or potential to do that, I want to take the sticker off the helmet. Take the sticker off the maroon helmet. Act like it is a created team in college football 25. And let's have an honest conversation about a team that has a top 10 returning production, a returning quarterback, a second-year head coach that did go 8-5 in his first season in the SEC. And if you just looked at that record, you could convince yourself that that was a really good year. That was a very impressive first season. But because they were 7-1 going into November, many think it was a disappointing year because they ended it 8-5. One game away, one conference win away. Honestly, a catch by Amari Daniels in the 4 overtimes against Auburn, that catch away from a potential SEC championship appearance for the first time in Texas A&M's history with a first-year head coach in Mike Elko. He is back. You have continuity in the offensive and defensive coordinators. You have 2 dynamic running backs. You have your entirety of your offensive line returned, which was a strength of last season. It's not like you're just bringing back guys that weren't good. You're bringing back elite talent. You have all of this going in your favor. But because you have the Texas A&M logo on your helmet, everyone will discredit it. Now, I'm at a point with them where I don't want to go so far down the deep end where I'm convincing myself that, yeah, they're going to go to a college football playoff. Because if it was that simple and the talent was all I was looking at and the returning production was all I was looking at the end of the day, I would convince myself of a lot of things. Their schedule is difficult. And why I think they have a good chance is because I do think if they were able to win maybe one of the 3 difficult away games they have, Texas, LSU, Notre Dame, not in that order. If anything, that's a reverse order. And if they're able to sweep their difficult home games with the Floridas of the world, a South Carolina, and Auburn, if they're able to get through that with a trap game at Arkansas in a rivalry matchup, with all the things that are going in their favor, Texas A&M does put themselves in a very good position to make their first college football playoff appearance. Now let's talk about the other teams I want to consider here. Utah, a perennial dominant team in the Pac-12, is still trying to figure out their footing in the Big 12. This comes from primarily Cam Rising and the madness of the quarterback position. I mean, truthfully, Utah has just consistently been a team that we like their talent. We like their head coach who could be potentially playing for his last season this upcoming year. I thought potentially last year was Kyle Whittingham's last year. And now that they finally, and I mean finally, after almost 2 years of not knowing the quarterback position, I believe they played 4 different guys. We're talking about a 5-7 team, and I'm potentially thinking they could go to the college football playoff. It's for a couple of reasons. The Big 12 is wide open. You could say Arizona State, you could say Kansas State, Iowa State, you could say TCU, you could say all these different teams have the potential to win this conference. I mean, last year, they got rid of the preseason poll because last year, the worst ranked team in the Big 12 ended up winning the whole thing. It is wide open. And so I'm looking at Utah, a team that everyone will admit and say, oh yeah, Utah's a good team. Utah is a consistent team. You know what you're going to get. And consistency is something that I'm looking for as a potential team that if they find another gear with that quarterback position, because once they had the quarterback, they were a very good team, a well-coached team with 2 NFL offensive linemen. I trust their defense because they have a defensive coordinator who most likely is going to take over the coaching position. They have the recipe right there. Now, one thing we will preview in the coming weeks is their first game is against UCLA. Nico Iamaleava is going to be going against them in week 1. I think that's a very interesting matchup. I don't want to preview that too quickly. But Utah is a team I am 100% considering to be a team that could make a college football playoff run. I will also put out Nebraska. Now, if we're looking at the betting market, that gives us at least an inkling of the likelihood. Nebraska is a plus 900. And when we're talking about Nebraska, you're putting a lot of faith in a guy like Dylan Raiola, a guy like Matt Rule, to take a significant step forward in year 3. It's crazy to me as a college football fan that Nebraska, a former blue blood, if you want to still call them a blue blood, you can do that. That could be definitely a topic for another day because I know that's just a whole can of worms that college football fans love to argue about during the offseason. But if we're just looking in the vacuum of Nebraska, Dylan Raiola, as much as people want to make the Patrick Mahomes comparisons, the jokes, at the end of the day, that's a very good quarterback who I think had a very good true freshman season when he was really being put into the fire. You had your ups, you had your downs, but what you had at the end of the season was a quarterback that learned a lot and still has the ceiling of one of the best quarterbacks in the country. You have a dynamic running back. You have a head coach who has been known to take a leap either in the 2nd or 3rd season, and you have a schedule that is very, very manageable. I look at that schedule, and I'm not trying to discredit some of the tier 2 teams, but the thing with the Big Ten that I've always said that has kind of held them back from potentially being the best conference in all of college football is the lack thereof a tier 2. They have the high-end talent. They have the Oregons, the Penn States, the Ohio States of the world, who Nebraska virtually doesn't have to play most of those. And then you have a long lineage of tier 2 programs. And if Nebraska is the team that I think they could be, this could be this year's Indiana. And I think that's a very large claim to have where we're talking about them being this year's Indiana. But I also do believe that this is a team that could take a major step forward, that could be a unexpected, 10-2. You may be looking at that schedule and saying, I could find 3-4 losses. I could also see 10 wins in there, especially if I'm expecting them to take the leap. And the last team to consider here is another Big Ten Tier 2, or at least a team that I think if we just looked at the numbers in a vacuum of 2024, you would think USC is a bad football team or a very average football team. And with USC, it's an interesting conversation because there's a lot of nuance to add to this. Lincoln Riley is one of the most polarizing head coaches in all of college football. There's no way around that. He will be one of the more polarizing guys in college football, especially with the leave to Oklahoma still being something that I think will forever linger, like the same way that, I think of blanking on it, Lane Kiffin with USC. It's always going to be a part of his history because it was such a jarring leap. But with USC, you have two wide receivers who I think are incredibly dynamic. Jacoby Lane is just a dominant, go get the ball type of wide receiver. And I think if he takes a step in the quarterback position, Jaden Mayalva had a very interesting up and down bowl game against Texas A&M. But the thing with USC is I'm banking that their defense that did take a step forward. I mean, honestly, any step was going to be a step forward for this defense. As they brought in a new defense coordinator last year, he's going to be in year 2. They were in the hundreds in virtually most advanced analytics and normal, just standard defensive statistics. They go to like the 50s and 60s. Now, a lot of people may look at that and say, well, the defense still isn't outright good. And I wouldn't disagree with you, but what I would also say is it's a huge step forward. It reminds me a lot of LSU. The expectations were on the floor, but Blake Baker got them all the way up to that level. You're hoping the progression continues there. And if we're looking on the offensive side of the ball with Lincoln Riley, and you're telling me the quarterback position is the biggest question mark, I'm taking that bet. I'm trusting that the guy that's really good with quarterbacks and continuously produces Heisman level talents, I'm going to take the bet that he doesn't even need Jaden Mayalva to get to a Heisman level. He doesn't need to get there. But the offense is going to put points on the board, and as long as the defense takes that step forward, they can easily be in contention to make their first ever college football playoff.